Hello, everyone. Recently, I made a video about writers having day jobs. Well, now I thought I would give my thoughts on authors being financially supported by their spouses. Of course, now I think that would be absolutely wonderful, a dream come true, if I had a wife who was willing to support me. Because, for one thing, of course, that makes it easier. That would make it easier for me, of course, to write. While also feeling, financially secure, but also it would demonstrate, at least hopefully, that my spouse has faith in me as a writer and believes in me. However, there is still somewhat of a stigma around um, male authors or just males in general being supported financially by their wives. Because when I hear about authors being supported by their spouses, it's almost always a female author who is being supported by their husband. It's hardly ever the other way around, which I think is very unfortunate. Um, However, there are certain pitfalls when it comes to a spouse who is being financially supported, whether you're a man or woman. For example, if you are being financially supported by your spouse, you are going to have a lot of faith in that person. You will have to have faith and trust that they will not abuse their power or their position because they absolutely could. So, for example, a spouse might try the spouse who has more financial stability might try to dominate or control the spouse who is dependent on them. For example, by saying things like, "Well, if you don't do this, then I'll stop paying for that," or "Well, because I make the most money, therefore I don't have to consult you in financial decisions. What I say goes." Or in some cases, a spouse can become the breadwinner can become resentful in the sense that they could view their position as being unfair. For example, well, you get to stay home and do what you want all day, whereas I'm have to work all day and I can't do what I want. And it's this mentality that, well, if I have to suffer, then you should also have to suffer. It's this mentality that well, that I guess you could say that physical labor, that is the most important, that is the only way that a spouse can contribute to a relationship, that other things like again emotional sacrifices and such, that those things aren't valued nearly as much. And so it's this idea that everything always has to be 50-50 in every situation. Whereas I think that's a very unrealistic expectation, that things always have to be 50-50 in all areas, because obviously every spouse will have their strengths and weaknesses, and in some areas, one spouse will have to pull a little bit more weight than the other. It just depends on which area you're talking about, and so but I could very easily see that happening if I were being financially supported by a wife. Of course, there are other pitfalls if an author becomes financially secure, because if that happens, then they'll have to worry about trusting potential romantic partners, because they might think, well, they're only after me for my money. So, especially if you're a man, if you're a man, it's kind of a no-win situation, because you're going to have a man is going to have trouble getting a woman to support them if they are still struggling financially. If they're not struggling financially, then they're going to have to they're going to have trouble trusting other people. So in some ways, it's kind of a no-win situation if you're a man. It's not that women don't have their own problems to deal with. They certainly do. But now, I'm not someone who believes that gender doesn't matter at all in relationships. But I am of the opinion that men and women typically, of course there are exceptions, have different temperaments, but they can bring those unique temperaments, to the same kind of work. So men and women can fulfill the same roles, but they'll do it in different ways. And so I think that's a very nuanced perspective. But again, those are my thoughts on writers potentially being supported by their spouses, and the positives and negatives of such a situation.